The Depth to Delve Deep by Rote Writer. Chapter 58 Tourist Traps. Throughout his travels, he's been trapped by tourist traps. Rote really wants to check out the Abbey, but the cost to enter is £3 or £4, a price he can't afford, let alone commit to. He holds back the reins, running him ragged. He continues walking around town, passes a small alley hiked for hundreds of years. It leads into a hidden away little chapel, seemingly there since medieval times. He sits in a secluded section in the back garden of the little getaway. Rote checks his stash of stones grabbed from Stonehenge for the first time. He anticipates seeing just tiny little stones, grains of gravel. The two handfuls are emptied out into one of his cupped hands carefully. He's supernaturally surprised after sifting through the stones to find a diamond in the rough, a tiny little white crystal. Just the former analogy is enough to send his mind and the little find into safekeeping. Safely in his wallet, where he keeps some other precious stones snatched from various sacred sites around Scotland, Ireland, and England. His bags are full of collectibles, capturing the essence offered at each locale. Only the tiny, precious ones make it safely into his wallet pouch. After maybe an hour of sitting out in the garden, a woman comes down the path. She asks him, "Would you like some tea and cookies?" Rote accepts the offer. Along the way to where he is being led, he peeks in through the tiny chapel tucked away from all to see. Adjoined to that is a long barrack-styled house. He learns the sick and the dying have been housed in it for hundreds of years, through the most trying of medieval times, plagued by plagues. He's welcomed into the house. It sort of hides what lies behind. He never really goes into the house proper. He's led into a little enclosed veranda-type attachment attached to the quaint quarters. Soon he's surrounded by a group of people who share the same beliefs. Of what, he's not sure. They get to talking. Rote does most of the talking. He tells them about his adventures. The one about visiting the holy island of Iona brings interest to all listening. He lets them know the situation he's in and how grateful he is to have at least found shelter for the night. One of the older ladies, the very one who finds him in the back garden sifting through stones, makes an appealing statement about Rote's aura. "Your aura is beautiful. You need not worry. Your future is fine." Rote leaves, thanking them for the tea and cookies. He heads back to the hostel, hoping he can get a good night's sleep. He's absolutely fatigued on all planes of existence. It's still early in the evening. Back in the Glastonbury backpackers' dorm, within the Crown Hotel, Rote lies down on his bottom bunk. The dorm holds 4 bunks, 8 people. He meets one of them, a young person who appears to have been taking too many drugs as far as Rote can see. His mind seems to be grasping for reality. He's nice enough, and Rote surmises spiritually minded people, no matter how screwed up, are at least spiritual. Meanwhile, he's unable to sleep with people coming and going. He gets up and goes down to the living area of the hostel to watch a little television. There he meets one of the 2 managers, seemingly intrigued by Rote's entrance into the hostel. He's already a legend in the making. Everyone is generally very nice. He meets the chef and a couple of other folks staying in the hostel, some for quite a while. He heads back up to the dorm, hoping not to be disturbed. He tries to catch some sleep. It's not until after 11, when all the lights are turned off in the dorm, before Rote finally falls asleep. However, because he's sharing a space with 7 other people, the noises and such intimately wake him up throughout the night and the nights to follow. Everyone has a different schedule, and mixed with alcohol-steeped deprivation in an environment like that is inevitable. But at least he's warm, dry, and clean. The next morning he awakes, and by the end of the day he's working in the kitchen as a dishwasher. Just part-time, but it's a start. He's hired with no questions asked, and is to be paid in cash once a week. Nearing the end of a work week, so he'll be included during that pay period of work. By the 3rd day, he's paid along with the other employees, cash on payday. He starved himself for the first few days, but now with what little money he's earned, he goes to the supermarket and buys himself a couple of fresh loaves of bread. He'll just pick at his bread daily. His drinking water is retrieved from the outlet jutting outside of the Chalice Well grounds, in a historically holy well with pure spring water. He's set sort of with bread and water, and so survives the first week. but it's hard for him. He still has a disease, an incurable one to see to his truth. He ends up spending what's left of his meager earnings on an entrance fee for the ruined remains of Glastonbury Abbey, and an entrance fee for the Chalice Well Gardens, all interested save for the fees for them which suffer him some sustenance. While at Glastonbury Abbey, he learns it's once the mightiest of all abbeys in England, and had it not been for Henry VIII's medieval grievances with the Catholic Church and all things thus related, from the Pope all the way down to the pauper, the abbey might have survived his reign. Rote sure that if Henry hadn't hung the abbots, then surely someone else would have. Years later, Cromwell or William of Orange would not have stood for a papist monopoly on the great riches the wealthy abbey once has. And judging by the ruinous remains, Rote sees that Henry VIII does quite a number on the abbey, with only the foundations standing, it seems. He hangs the abbots on top of the Tor. One of the most peculiar points Rote learns is that the abbots, besides being medieval brewers and purveyors of alcohol, market the belief in their heyday that legendary King Arthur's remains, along with Guinevere's, are buried in the abbey grounds. And for those reasons, amongst others, the place becomes a great place of pilgrimage. After all, it's Avalon. Rote on his tour of the grounds makes sure he sees the little placard holding the high claim buried underground before him. After leaving the abbey grounds, he walks up to Weary Hill, and wonders if the name comes from people like him, weary of it all. Weary Hill sits directly across from the Tor. It sort of forms a lopsided woman's chest. The Tor is the bigger breast, and the flat part in between forms part of the town. Halfway up Weary Hill, he finds a thorn bush, believed to be an offshoot of Joseph of Arimathea's staff. He apparently sticks the staff in the ground where the thorn bush now grows. As Rote learns, around the grounds of Rosslyn Chapel, Joseph of Arimathea is the believed uncle of Jesus, and in charge of his burial thereafter. Joseph supposedly buries the Holy Grail at the base of the Tor. Also adding to the lore, Joseph takes the young Christ on many adventures, one of them apparently to Avalon. The abbots market the claim. Christ builds his first church on their abbey grounds. Rote thinks, no wonder the abbey at one time is the richest diocese of Great Britain. What a pilgrimage pilfering ploy. And boy, does their karma alarm and arm them. All hung and strung in the way they stung so many. Rote suspects it's the price for heisting the name of Christ. From Weary Hill, he goes onwards to the Chalice Well with its own history. The natural springs tell the story. They're believed to be healing waters. He learns there are two springs, one highly mineralized in calcium and the other in iron. Both springs are accessible outside the Chalice Well grounds on Chalice Hill Road. There are two taps available 24 hours a day to serve those who like fresh spring water. Rote's unable to afford the entrance fee, like the abbey grounds, but he pays it nonetheless. It means he'll go hungry. Upon his first visit to the well, he removes his unbelievably worn shoes and steps into the wading pool to heal his soul and the soles of his feet.